So let's start that discussion about activism with all of you. Thank you for being here. First of all, I would like to introduce you, Miss Élisabeth Moreno, of course. Everybody knows you. Yeah, everybody knows you. But let me introduce you. You're president at Leia Partners, but you used to be a minister of diversity and equality for the French government. You're also member of the DE board at Sanofi. Is that right? Yeah. So welcome once again. We have the pleasure to welcome Stacy Algrain. Hi, Stacy. You are very, very committed. Not everybody knows you, but it's ongoing. I think you should be very well known because you have great commitments in your personal life, but also in your now daily life. You're a climate justice activist, and it's a battle, and you're co-founder of the media dedicated to biodiversity, La Corneille. So you are very, very close to hot topics, which are, of course, linked to the protection of the planet. So welcome to you, Stacy. Welcome also you, Thierry Sibieude. Thierry, welcome. You're professor at ESSEC Business School, and you're the founder of the Chair of Innovation and Social Entrepreneurship, which was quite new at the time when you created it. So congratulations for that. Welcome to you. And of course, welcome to you, Nicolas CELIER, co-founder of Ring Capital, which was one of the first committed fund. You've moved from the traditional finance to a very different, new way of investment. So it's a pleasure to have you. So activism is, as I said, as I introduced, a new way to get engaged, but more in a more direct way. Let me just list you some activists. Greta Thunberg, of course, everybody knows Greta Thunberg, but also Camille Etienne in France. They are very committed on the climate change. We have also a lot of activists around the world for justice, for social justice, and it's very important. Is it something that is accelerating, Stacy? Something really impactful? Is activism through these leaders, these new leaders, is something really, really positive according to you?
So, hi everyone, my name is Stacy. Thank you so much for this question, because I think that's something that a lot of people are asking today. Is activism something that can be impactful and works on these topics, whether it's climate, biodiversity, but also women's rights, because we still have some way to go there. If you look at history, taking this example of women's rights, if as a woman today I can vote, if I can put a ballot in during the elections, it's because women at some point in history have been fighting for this right, whether it's by asking politely or going in the streets to fight for it. So today, when we are talking about this big thing staying at the top of our heads, which is climate, of course it's working. Why? Because if you take the subject of carbon bombs, I'm actually working on a campaign that many of you might know. It's the ECOP campaign, the Stop ECOP campaign. ECOP, if you're not familiar with it, is like a huge carbon bombs that Total, a French company, is planning to build between Tanzania and Uganda. It's a pipeline that's going to transport oil from one country to a port. And actually, by being activists, we have achieved to have 26 banks around the world that said publicly that they are not going to fund this climate bomb. We achieved to have 23 insurances to say publicly, we are not going to support this project. So of course it's working. Not as fast as I would like and as we would like, of course, but it's working because we are putting the subject on the table today. We are the chance to have such an event because activists, citizens, political leaders have been talking about climate when it was not the subject the most in fashion ways. Because actually, people are putting their body and their lives on the front. Yes, being an activist here in France can be kind of shiny because we have the mic in some events like this. We have the chance to speak in the press, in the news, nice. But in some countries, it's also risking to go to jail, like is in the case of Uganda. And it's also risking your life because people are dying to fight for their rights, just for life.
Yeah, that's good to remind it. Just for the public, I would like you to just to go back to the origin about your activism. It's not like a trend for you. It's something that is once again from the origin. Tell us more about the history, why you are an activist.
Yes, so I'm still quite young. I'm only 26. But when I was younger, I used to live in a small city in the south of France, which is called Berleton. It's between Aix-en-Provence and Marseille. You might know it better. And this small city with only 16,000 inhabitants had 3 highly at-risk industrial sites.
Civil sites.
Civil sites, yeah. Yes. And one of them is a petrochemical plant, which is nice because that's one of the subjects I'm fighting for today. And this petrochemical plant was actually sold to the people in my city as something really nice, like it gives you jobs, money to provide food and a roof on the head of your family. Really nice, that's what we need at the basis of our needs. But even if I went there as a kid and, they put a yellow jacket in me and something on my head at the time where it was not as much topic in France, well, at one time in my life, I happened to understand that it was not something so good and so great because I started to be actually sick when I was 18 years old, chronic inflammatory disease that touched my digestive systems and all of the bottom of my body. And I couldn't walk for like 6 months because I was such in pain. I had to stop my studies for 1 year, all because some people refused to give us the basic informations about the places where we are living actually. And during my research, of course, I questioned the way I was living, what I was eating, if I did enough sports, because at the time in France we had some public campaign saying that if you move, if you eat healthy, you're gonna be fine. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. Because I took actions and I tried to find information about my environment. And I learned that we had a cancer rate twice the national average. And same thing about chronic disease. And then I was really scared because, of course, when you are citizens, you believe that the people you put in power are here to protect you. They didn't. They didn't. Why? Because they put the private interest at first, really on the table. And then here we were people mostly from below and average class here in France, people mostly from immigration, which is the case of my family, and because we didn't know we had the right to a healthy environment, and because we didn't know that having a job is not enough when you're human, we didn't fight for this right to an environmental and free of chemicals, and that's why they got us by taking us like a shield finally with this job in front of our nose.
Yeah, I think it was very important just to go back to the origin because sometimes we don't know people who are just, claiming something really powerful, but it's really a good reason, of course. Miss Élisabeth Moreno, what about activism? How does it sound to you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Marion, first, let me tell you how happy I am to be with you all this afternoon and to speak about something that is so close to my heart. I'm going to confess you something. I am not a politician. When I was called to join the government, maybe being a bit naive, I thought politics was the best place to be an activist. Because I thought that was the place where you defend every single human right. And the interesting thing is, in fact, it's not. I have been told I was in charge of gender equality, diversity, and equal opportunities. And once I had a tough meeting with one of my colleagues who didn't want to understand the importance of voting a certain law to protect some women. And he told me, hey, you should stop here because you are not an activist, you are a politician. It was such a shock for me. And I think activism is something super important because it has played a major role in ending slavery. It has played a major role in protecting people against forced work. It has helped people who needed protection because they were women. It has helped fighting against xenophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, and all these kind of things. It has helped doing amazing stuff in terms of environment. I don't remember which scientist said Greta Thunberg did more in 5 years to raise awareness about the state of our planet than most of the past ecologists. And I was thinking, why is that every word ending by ism is considered as something that shouldn't be good? You know, feminism is considered as a negative thing by many people. Racism is a negative thing. You take anti-Semitism is a negative thing. Then you have homophobia, you have all these things. And I'm like, what the hell do we have in mind as human to consider, and by the way, there is no economic activism. Have you realized that?
Oh yes, there is one in
There is
finance. We
capitalism.
will discuss later.
There is capitalism. That's right. That's right. But I'm curious to understand how we came to the point where we are putting economy in the middle, in the center of our lives. And the example that was just shared, there is certainly an economic reason behind what happened here. There is certainly a domination question behind these things. Some people who believe that they know better than other people what should be done and how it should be done. And I think activism is absolutely fundamental because it is probably the one single thing that is still fighting for human rights and dignity and for the protection of our planet. And because of that, we should all be activists.
Thierry, Sibieude from ESSEC Business School. You seem to agree with Ms. Moreno, of course, but how does it sound personally for you?
I would say when I heard Élisabeth talking about politics, that I would say that politics are not always activism enough. In other words, I used to be also a local politician during 30 years. I was vice president of County of Val d'Oise, Conseil départemental du Val d'Oise. I was in charge of environment during 7 years and handicapped people during 4 years. And what I regret is that there is this distinction between politicians who would be supposed to have the power and activists who would be supposed to have the good idea. And to me, and I hope that politicians will become more activists. And I think that sometimes it's possible to be an activist and a politician. And
But activism is the new politics?
I hope so. I hope so, and I think politics is the best place, maybe not at the national level, I don't know the national level, but at the local level, you really can have the possibility to enforce some activities. And I can give you an example. I was in charge of handicapped people. I told you I was concerned by this question. One of my sons was autist. Autist is not a good word in fact. And autism also. And we had to take care of him. And it's quite difficult when you have an autistic child in the family to develop your professional approach. And, autistic people are people. And there is a sort of taboo in France about sexual life. And until the day I was in charge of handicapped people, nobody wanted to talk about sexual life in handicapped people centers. And then I said, well, I really think that it's necessary when you're the president, sometimes some people listen to you. And we implement some measures to put this question on the stage. That was the first thing. So to answer your question, I think that the main problem is between the speech
Yeah.
and the activity.
And
Too often there is a big difference between those people who talk, and activists are a bit prisoner of their position, and politicians are sometimes are frightened to take initiative.
Yeah. So I would just balance what you're saying, which of course is very interesting to go further on the discussion. Nicolas, and I forgot to tell the public, the audience, that you are also the co-founder of France Digital and Tech for Good France. We talk about activism and in the politician way, but we can't close our eyes on violence. Is this something that is a barrier, you know, in terms of how to be powerful? There is so much violence, of course, driven by social media.
Yes, but social media and media focus a lot on the activist violence, but the original violence, the core violence, is inequality violence, is the way we split the Earth's resources, and that's the violence triggering the activist violence you see everywhere in the newspaper. So that don't seems activism is a first reaction to violence. Activism as such, violence is not the core of activism. It's a reaction, it's a consequence. Now, is violence the best answer and the most efficient way to be an activist? I don't think violence, I think is for us as investors or social entrepreneurs, we think the response to violence is acting, is building, is proposing new solutions rather than just blaming and criticizing and not doing. So I think the real for us, and that we aim to finance activist entrepreneur, because activist entrepreneur, they reply to violence by and that's tough. And some entrepreneurs, especially in many countries, some social entrepreneurs are killed for the environment, for defending the population. So it's not a question of courage. I think it's a question of principle, avoid not responding violence to violence, and efficiency as well.
Yeah, but we would like to, of course, what is seeking is, of course, the efficiency of direct action, right? We agree on that. We need to change. We need to get some new systems globally. What is the limit with violence? Sorry for going back to that topic, but I think it's very important because we're talking about multiple audiences, politicians, decision makers, startups, financial, investors. So if there is a mess in terms of dialogue, no efficiency, where is the limit and what is the best narrative? Do you want to answer, Ms. Moreno?
Violence is never, ever an answer to anything. Never. But you have some people like Nelson Mandela or Gandhi who got to be violent to be heard. Because sometimes, some people may think it's the only way to get the attention they deserve, or it is the only way to get access to power. But I can tell you, violence is never, ever a solution. And you can be an activist, being violent can reduce the impact of what you do. Because I have seen these activists who are destroying some piece of art. I don't think it is the right way to express what you are fighting for. Because then media only talk about the buzz thing, and they tend to diminish the power or the reason why you are doing these things. And I totally agree with Nicolas CELIER when he says maybe the first violence is the fact that some people are simply neglecting the fundamental things in our society. When you have 1% of the entire humanity owning 90% of the wealth, it is a violence. When you say to the African people, stay where you are, we don't want you in our countries, and these people are dying because we are destroying the planet, it is the biggest violence you can imagine. So I think, no, violence is never an answer. And I think it is the responsibility of politicians, of leaders, be it political or economic, to take their responsibility and make sure that some peaceful people do not turn into violent people because they think they have no choice.
Who want to react on what Élisabeth said, but also on the good narrative, the space where people could agree all together?
Yes, I think the question of violence is really important because it's put on the table this fact that when you take people with power, what they have in common is that they manipulate narratives and words with some quite excellent qualities, because they have this access to medias, they have been to the great schools, they know how to speak in public. So the first question we should be asking about violence is, what is violence? The basic definition of this word. If you think that violence is taking actions against goods, like throwing paints against art or anything, or on a building, yeah, we are violent. If you think violence is threatening the lives of millions of people by being shitty leaders, yes, we are clearly in a state of pure violence. Why? Because actually the people in power, they are not acting on this question of climate. Because if we take again the example of Total Energy, when we are asking our leaders to take actions on a French company, they say we can't act. Well, actually, you can act to make laws about the taxes. You can act by making laws about what we as citizens can and cannot do. So you have some kind of powers, but whenever we speak about these economic areas, suddenly our leaders, they are defenseless. They are like, we cannot do anything. So who's in charge? The people, the politicians that we voted for, or the people who are at the head of the companies? So that's the first point. And I would like to remember that actually when we do actions, the limits that we are putting is never to touch people, because we are fighting for these things that really join us all here, that we are alive, that we are well-being, and that we are human and being, actually. So that's the limit, not touch people, because we are fighting for you, whether you want or understand it. Whether it's Patrick Pouyanné, the head of Total Energy, I'm fighting for him, I'm fighting for his life, actually. So that's what I want people to understand. But actually, we are really trying our best to show them that we are putting our lives and body between them, their destroying actions, and the wall just behind us. We are the only wall between these things and the catastrophes that are coming for us. So the narrative, actually, what we are trying to do is really to make people understand that we don't want to take away your liberties and your freedoms, but we want to prevent the catastrophes from taking them from you, and unwillingly, actually. Because when we think about liberties, what is liberties? It's being alive. That's the first liberty that we should be thinking. Going to school, having a life where we are all happy, that's the basis. Being able to feed your family, to have a roof on your head. Is freedom having a yacht and going abroad for like 1 week, 1 weekend to have pasta and caviar with your best friends? If that's what you think is liberty, I'm disagreeing with you. Because actually your liberty is putting a threat on my life and other people's lives. So that's the limit, I think.
Thierry, at ESSEC Business School, is it something that is really general from the youngest? I know, because you're of course you're a professor, you're a teacher. Is Stacy like another students that you're close to?
She could have been my student. Yes, yes. We can see a new tendency from our students to ask the professors to integrate in courses issues about social, about environmental. That's true, and we started to do it 20 years ago at ESSEC. So some people who say Grande École, the education system, French education system doesn't do anything, when they say that, that's not true. Which is true that it's not compulsory. In other words, in our school, people who wanted to get some information, some courses about social, about environmental, about sustainable development, those students could have these courses. At the moment, what we're doing is to give to all students all students who are integrated in ESSEC, they have to follow a 20 hours course about climate.
About climate?
About climate change.
Okay.
I created the course and I created a MOOC about that 3 years ago. But because to me, one of the ways to fight against violence is education. If you educate people, then you give them some other possibilities to make themselves understood. And the question of activism, it's the question of the capacity to take into account the contradiction and the opposition. And Nicolas was talking about social media. The difficulty at the moment is that social media reduced the debate. When you are on the LinkedIn or whatever, you always receive some posts and some messages linked to your own position, to your own centers of interest. And and of course you're very happy. You say, oh, I'm right.
Yeah, it's limited.
Okay. And then you have the tendency to forget that there are other views, those other ways to see the world. So the education to me is really the key issue. Then they give liberty and possibilities and capabilities in the developing countries for people to get a better life. Then you can have a real debate, because another difficulty in activism is the posture.
Yeah.
Some people are in communication, and sometimes we have the impression that that's the only one thing. They just want to get the buzz. Okay, they talked about me, and I can show that to my wife or to my girlfriend and to my daughter, and everybody's happy, and I'm a great guy. But is it enough? That's not the problem. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
And so that's...
I have one question for you, because I think everybody has the same in mind. Of course, you represent a big high school, you know, ESSEC school. Of course, we have in mind AgroParisTech with all the students coming on stage and say, we refuse the system. We do not agree with the corpus, the educational one at AgroParisTech, and we are activists in a way, you know, against the system, because companies and education are linked to one world, which is, of course, a world that is not, going for change. What was your impression? How did you feel that day?
Well, of course there are links between Grande École and the education system and companies, and that's a great news, because that's the way and the possibility for people to be employed and to get money and to have a nice personal life. Talking about this day, my first question is to know if those students who came to the stage accepted the degree or refused the diploma. I don't know. If they accepted the diploma, what they said is just a communication action, because then they are
Stacy Stacy is saying no.
If they refuse, if they accepted the diploma, I will take a few minutes to explain my position. I'm sorry. If they accepted the diploma, okay, they are young, they say I want to go to the Larzac or whatever and have coach, and okay, that's great. I'm going to do it. But in 10 years, when they come back, they go back to companies like Total or whatever, and they say, hey, I have a degree from agro-business school, so you can hire me because, you know, I have a good background.
You just, yes.
Sorry, if they don't accept the degree, okay, that's more fair. Second, to me it's not true that it's not possible when you're in a school to ask to have some courses. Students have a great power in schools. I would say it's the only one group of people, only one stakeholder that everybody listens to. In other words, if you go to the professors, to the deans, and they say, we really want that, you have some possibilities to act inside the system and to improve the system. And let me tell you a story I gave to Marion. 2 years ago, a student of ESSEC, an alumni, sent me a LinkedIn message, and he wrote to me, I'm going to say that, and to give shame on ESSEC, to say that there is nothing at ESSEC about sustainable development, that ESSEC doesn't do enough to train people about climate change issues. And I said, oh, thank you, Elliot, to tell me, but please, before sending your post, let's have a call, because I would like to explain to you some things. Of course, he posted his post before calling me. Then I knew his name, and I checked all the list of the people who took my courses, who are elective, that I created. I created the course on sustainable development at ESSEC in 1996. And this course is open to anyone who wants to attend this course. I gave 5 courses about the social issues. There is a chair. This gentleman never attended one elective course. He never took one course. So it's true that ESSEC could do more. I definitely agree. That's what I say to the dean all the time. But it's not true to say that there is nothing which has been done, that Grand École have to be shamed because they are just, I would say, à la solde du système. So to me, the problem of activism is the nuances and the difficulty to share nuances.
So what we understand is something that would be agreed by everyone, just to collectively rethink systems. One word before going back to Ms. Moreno. Stacy, you want to react briefly?
Yes. First, I would like to say that's a point, that's the way of seeing things, but we cannot definitely take one example and just generalize it. This guy, he didn't go to your class. Well, he's maybe an idiot, I don't know him, so let's not pretend that I know him. One thing I would say is like, saying that these students shouldn't take their diploma is always going back into this narrative that the people that are the less powerful and the less influential should be the one taking the credit and taking the weight on their shoulders for the whole system. Actually, when you're a student and you take the mic, like I'm doing right now, to say that you're not going to work into these companies, you are sending a big message. Whether you stay true to your words or anything, you are sending something really impactful into the public. That's something, that's one point. And then after, whether they go back, I don't think they will go back, because do we have any proof that actually the people like me, activists, have ever betrayed their camp, like you can call it? Nope, because actually we don't have the empirical studies on that. And I hope one thing, it's that in 10 years, like the example you take, in 10 years there will be no such companies to go back to. That's the main point, because we will have done such a great job, but no companies will be able to continue this kind of job. And actually, the last point I want to add on that is that actually we are talking a lot about the students and everything, and we are always shedding the light on the kind of people that are already in kind of influential spheres. The one we are never talking is the people in like my cities, the people with no diploma, the people who are actually working their ass off for like 1,200 euros, nothing. And that don't have the time to actually question the way this system is killing them, is killing their family, and the world we're living. So we should actually give them the mic, because they have actually some quite big stories to tell, and we shouldn't praise always the kind of story that go well with our narratives, like the actors from Hollywood saying, we are going to die. Yeah, people have been saying that for like 10 years and nobody listened to them. It's because you're a man with a power, with influence and money, but we should be listening. Your words are no better than anyone else. Actually, we should be listening to all of you, because you have one way to seeing the world, and it's important. I want to listen to you because the way to change things is with empathy and not power and not money. That's what I want to say.
Thank you very much, Stacy. If we have some time and very brief intervention, we could give the micro to the audience, which is of course very briefly. Thank you.
Briefly. I have the bad role. I know I'm a boomer.
No questions.
I have the bad role. But, and of course, an example is not the general rule. But in school, there's not a question of money. Not yet. No. Now, the tuition fee is, of course, it's a question of money, but when you are in the school, if you want to get some activities, if you want to get something, it doesn't depend on your money anymore. I can tell you. So I agree that the idea is to avoid that all companies disappear, but what I was saying is not about the fact that they should take all the burden on their shoulders, those guys. To me, it's the way they choose, the communication, because this is something to get buzz, and I think it's not a good way to make things move.
Okay, but we have a lot of time just after the discussion to debate, of course. Élisabeth Moreno, you partly answered my next question about the politician sphere, you know, which is of course somehow very important for, you know, for the framework of change. I think you agree on that. Is there any small signal that, you know, in any part of the world that is, you know, sounding like a positive signal? Do you have any example from, you know, a new leadership, a new way of leadership, a new way of governance, listening to activists?
Well, I think, you know, maybe 10 years ago, companies like Ring Capital wouldn't have existed. I'm serious when I say that. Because I can tell you that I have seen very, very, very few business leaders who are seriously thinking about the impact of what they do in the society. Very few. I have worked on 4 continents, with multiple cultures, multiple ways of doing things. You may have some people closer to nature than others. But the reality is economics is taking all the space. I'm sorry to say that, but it is a reality today. And I remember when we started having these ESG thing that was becoming mandatory. Many companies put it in their agenda, but it was a kind of ticking the box exercise at the end of the year. And they just did 1 or 2 or 3 actions to say, okay, we did something good. Oh my God, we did something good for the environment and for social justice. But when you look at the key performance indicators, when you measure the progress, you just think, is it a joke? Because, you know, there is no better place than corporations for execution. When a company wants to execute something, and I have been a business leader, I know what it means executing to get results. But the thing is, when we speak about social and environmental responsibility, you don't really build your strategy so you can have the best performance at the end of the year. And I think this is a real and serious thing that we need to take in consideration now. Money nowadays is everything.
Yeah, but we cannot avoid, you know, not avoid, but IRA, the new policy from the United States for energy transition, the European Commission.
Totally agree, Marion. I totally agree.
There is a global change, you know, for,
so,
I don't know if it's the best, but...
You are right, but let me give you a very simple example that you will understand. The first law that was voted for the equal pay between men and women, when you have the same job, you have the same salary, right? Do you know when it was voted?
No, tell us.
1972. Okay? More than 50 years later, there is a difference between 15 and 20% gap salary. It's not because you vote laws that everything is done. You know, there are so many laws in our country that are not applied. So many laws. France is the country, and we can really be proud of that. We have the largest number of laws to fight discrimination. The largest number of laws. Do you believe that there is no discrimination in our country?
For sure.
Yeah, so I agree. The awareness is far more present than it used to be. And sometimes for good reason, most of the time for wrong reasons, okay? But it's not enough to make a vote on a law if you do not make sure it is correctly applied. And that's the reason why I'm telling you, I wish I could tell you, oh my Lord, I have seen so many companies doing fantastically well in this topic. But we are just at the beginning of something new. And the reason why things are progressing massively, I think, is because of activism. I can tell you that many, many things have progressed dramatically for women's rights after Me Too.
Yeah, that was
You see what I mean?
accelerator, big one.
And it's a shame. It's a shame to wait for this kind of denunciation to see things moving. So yes, most of the leaders are realizing that they cannot afford continuing neglecting the social injustice or the environmental impact of what they are doing, but they are not ambitious or bold enough. And I'm going to tell you, I'm truly convinced, because I've been in business and I have been in politics, if you take the 100 most important decision makers, be it politicians or business leaders, and they make a personal commitment to do the right thing so we can stop the warmth of our planet and we can stop all this discrimination, we can change the world. The problem is these people are not making these decisions.
Yeah. Nicolas has... You've one day we met a few years ago when you were at in the tech sector, when you were at Algrain Capital, which is a classical traditional fund, and you decided to go to social entrepreneurship for the social justice, for the climate justice, which was quite new at the time. It was like 3 years ago, maybe
2011.
2011. You had that. You decided to change because you told me you've seen Mohamed Yunus with Grameen Bank, the Nobel Prize, which has conceived that it was a good example in economy to do something very different in an efficient way. So that was your starting point. I just to go back to investment model standard, we see activism in traditional economy. Activism is also something that is a practice in investment. Can you tell us what about this type of activism? Is it good? Is it something that is not good? What is your statement about that?
On finance, activism finance?
Yeah, because we talk about at large about activism, but there is in the financial sector a new kind of activism, quite rare in France, but which has a lot of impact.
Yeah, still very small. But now reverting to your first point, what makes you change? When you see an entrepreneur who is creating a company that is performing well, but whose core activity is to solve a major social problem or environmental problem, like the evidence of Yunus of Grameen Bank, interest rates were very high, just doing things just the normal way, very simple way, counting on women, on the community, to be a guarantee for loans that are only attributed in people who will buy a cows, dig a well. It was working very, very well, and still this loan had a better repayment rate than the World Bank loans. So it's so obvious, there's no question. It's just a matter of seeking this alignment between what good I'm doing and how I can make it sustainable and a business, and it's not always the case, but when it can, it's obvious. It's not a question company. The subject is not for a company to do good things or to be nice or to have charities or to buy a carbon certificate to compensate or buy trees to compensate their transcontinental plane trips. That's not the issue. The issue is really rebuilding is a system. For 200 years we've had a revolution, industrial revolution. All our progress just consume human resources and consume the planet. It's obvious and easy. We just have to do the same system, but where the output is protecting the human person and protecting the planet. Otherwise, I say we won't be there, we all die. So it's not a huge revolution. It's just changing the alignments, and people who want to do it, social impact entrepreneur, the climate, or people like Theo, like each one, the guy says, we have a problem in France. Many refugees are here and have no job. But many companies can't hire talents. And so it's not a political debate whether refugees are good or bad. That's for politicians. They are here and they are talents. So each one, you say, okay, we'll identify what potential has every refugee, see whether I can train him, teach him to learn French, teach him cultural way to work in French company, which is not his background. And you know what? It works. And now company are paying him to do that so that they get talent. It's not a revolution. It's basic. But what the revolution is in the mindset. If we just do things normally, basically, we'll be better. The good thing of finance activism is quite funny because for a very long time, there have always been some activist fund. But what is an activist fund? An activist fund is a hedge fund who think that a company is not performing well, so he buy a few shares and then he go in assembly, he does a common action, he goes in the press, if this CEO was ousted like Emmanuel Faber or like Philippe Germont at Atos, well, it's young guy, 40 years old, knowing nothing. If you just get rid of this CEO, the stock price will get higher, and me, I can make a lot of money in 6 months' time. So that's what we call activism in finance, which is a bit quite kind of a surprise. No, it's true that, and Élisabeth knows that, finance rules the world. If you change finance, you can change the world.
Exactly.
So if you decide to use the same method that these activists use just to be a bit richer and without doing nothing in 6 months, if you do the same method, common action, media, vote in shareholders' assembly, you can have much more power and you can have a huge effect. Then if activism worked, some activism collectively could work from inside the system. You go and work in finance, go and work in companies, because you have the power to do so. If you work in finance, collectively, you can change things and in a quite an efficient way if you take these risks. But I think we have the means. It's quite easy actually to fix it.
After you created Ring Capital and Tech for Good and all you gather, when you participate to gather the ecosystem, which is very nice, and ChangeNOW is one of the examples. Did you have a lot of followers in the investors or
a lot of
scene? The followers, yeah, your people saying to you, I think you're right. It could be good to invest in social entrepreneurs. Instead of profitable companies and only profitable companies.
No, it's funny because 10 years ago, and first my people I was working with, they said, come on, you're joking, you cannot make business is serious, business is finance, so if you want to do good things, do it on Sundays, but you cannot mix business with being good at philanthropy, and that's the American way of thinking, huh? You have a huge Rockefeller doing a hardcore business, destructing lives on planet. And on the other hand, they will give tons of money to repair for philanthropy. So it's not a judgmental, it's also a matter of culture.
I have invented one word which is very interesting, non-for-profit.
Non-for-profit,
yeah,
exactly.
That's
non-for-profit. So if it's non-for-profit, it's good. And then we went to see some other social investor from the social economy and say, good, you'll be happy, we are not an association, but when you give some money, you give it once. If you invest in a company and it's the companies that can be profitable, so not depend on the subsidies, with $1 you can get back to the dealer and help another company. And then the social economy investor, you say, profit? Yeah, your company will making profit. But you're even worse than the other capitalism because you are making profit out of social injustice and so on. I say, okay, the profit there is just to be sustainable. Profit is not a bad thing. What you do with your profit is really issues.
One thing, Marion, because I think, nobody would blame anyone for making money if this money is spread between the people who contributed to make that money. The real problem today is this. How come the people who work hard for this economy cannot make advantage or take advantage of that benefit as well, And I think when we speak about injustice, people are, oh, that's a nice thing. It's not a nice thing. It's a fundamental thing that we need to have in mind today. And if you manage to spread these values amongst your ecosystem and so on, then it's okay. I don't remember who said, who controls the money? No, who owns the money controls the world. That's true. The problem is very few people are controlling the money and the rest is trying to survive with the means they have. That's where really the problem comes from. And the fact that you redistribute as a charity is not the solution. And I think about the businesses created by women. You know, very rarely when you have a woman presenting her business, most of the people ask her, why don't you create an association? But I don't want to create an association, I want to create a business. You see? And most of the businesses led by women are économie sociale et solidaire. And you know, people look at it like, oh, it's not real business. But it is. You do a job. You create job, you create value, you make progress, you change your country, and so on and so forth. So it's a total
It's almost 14% of the
mindset.
GDP in France. Yeah. And
Quite a
one
company.
day, if you just allow me before we end, because time is running and everybody is hot, you know. I asked Olivia Grégoire, who was the former Ministry of the Social Economy, and I asked her, why is it not only one minister? Why is there something that you have explained, the social economy and the economy? What about it? And she was like, yes, I told Bruno Le Maire once, but it's a bit complex. We have to end. Sorry for that. Thank you so much for your attention. Sorry. Thank you. We will, of course, interact with question and answer, but directly, thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon. Merci.